Thanks for logging on to myfoxhurricane.com. We are now tracking tropical depression number 18. This is that area we've been talking about for over a week now down across the Caribbean. Yesterday it was classified as potential tropical cyclone number 18, and that's just so they can start issuing some of those warnings just because it's close to land, so they need to start getting that messaging out. But now it has gained that tropical depression status. This will eventually become a tropical storm and eventually expect to become a hurricane. You look at the visible satellite loop. Here's the center right now. You're seeing more of that convection near the center. You're also starting to see more of these banding features starting to develop. So this is still in those early stages, but we have warm water, we have low wind shear, and so really we have a lot of the conditions that is going to allow this system to strengthen. There is some drier air on this western side of the storm, but for now it's dealing with that, and it does look like it has enough moisture that it will be allowed or be able to strengthen even more as we go through the coming days. But it's going to be somewhat of a tricky forecast as we go through the next few days here. So here's the current position of this storm, currently working its way to the north at 9 miles an hour. Winds right now are at 35 miles an hour. So remember, it's still just a depression at this point. But as it continues to work its way through these warm waters, expected to become a tropical storm. Next name on the list is Rafael, and then working its way just to the south of Cuba, expected to become a hurricane, move up into the Gulf of Mexico as a hurricane. But that's when it's going to start to move into an area where conditions aren't nearly as conducive to continue that development or really even to sustain this as a hurricane, because the drier air will start to become more of an issue, the cooler water temperatures, and then as it works its way up into the northern Gulf of Mexico, that wind shear, that's going to become more and more of an issue for this storm. So much of the time we've been watching these systems work their way into the Gulf of Mexico, and what we've been talking about, rapid intensification. We've been talking about these very powerful hurricanes. Well, this time around, you're not going to see that. You're actually going to see a storm that weakens as it moves through the Gulf of Mexico. So you look at the various computer models, and we're continuing to watch these shift around and tweak a little bit, but that general trend has been to shift a bit more towards the west. But you also notice towards the end of this track, you're seeing quite a bit of spread in these models. We see a group of models pushing on more towards, say, that easterly direction. We also have another group that shifts a bit more towards the west. So there's still some uncertainty in that longer range portion of the forecast, and a big reason why is because of the changes going on in the atmosphere, the steering currents changing around, and this storm is moving slower, and that will tend to make that forecast a little bit more challenging as we head towards the end of it. So as you're looking at the GFS ensembles, you can think of this as really just the uncertainty in the forecast. You can see basically everything is all over the place. So there's still a bit of uncertainty, but that general idea is to move it through, say, the central or the eastern Gulf of Mexico. So here's what's going on as far as the steering. We've got this area down to our south, tropical depression number 18 currently. We have the ridge of high pressure, which is sitting to the north of this. And typically this time of the year, you'd watch something just kind of scoot on towards the northeast out over the open waters. But with that ridge there, it blocks that pathway. So you don't see that type of a solution or that type of a scenario with this. So what will happen is this will continue to strengthen over these warmer waters of the Caribbean, expect to become eventually a hurricane before it even gets out of the Caribbean, working its way up into the Gulf of Mexico. That ridge is still in place, but that ridge is going to start to shift on towards the east. As it does so, we get the jet stream starting to dip down. So you have this opening right here. But again, remember, this storm is moving fairly slowly. We also have another high back on to the west, and that will tend to slow this down a little bit. And what will happen is this ridge or this dip in the jet stream, as that continues to build back down, this ridge is going to tend to build back towards the west a little bit. So that may be enough to really protect Florida and steer this a bit more towards that westerly direction. But We're talking about a lot of timing issues as we go through the next several days, but we do know the dry air, the cooler waters, and that wind shear will weaken this storm as it moves up into the Gulf of Mexico. So we'll continue to watch this, and we'll keep you updated right here on myfoxhurricane.com.